Onward, Christian soldiers, marching as to war, with the cross of Jesus going on before. Christ the royal master leads against the foe, forward into battle, see his banners go. Onward, Christian soldiers, marching as to war, with the cross of Jesus going on before. Oh, for a faith that will not shrink, though pressed by every foe, that will not tremble on the brink of any earthly woe, that will not murmur or complain beneath a chastening rod, but in the hour of grief or pain will lean upon its God. A faith that shines more bright and clear when tempests rage without, that when in danger knows no fear, in darkness feels no doubt. Lord, give us such a faith as this, and then whatever may come, we'll taste and hear the hallowed bliss of an eternal home. A charge to keep I have, a God to glorify, a never-dying soul to save, and fitted for the sky, to serve the present age, my calling to fulfill. Oh, may it all my powers engage to do my Master's will. Arm me with jealous care, as in thy sight to live, and o thy servant, Lord, prepare a strict account to give. Help me to watch and pray, and on thyself rely. Assured if I my trust betray, I shall forever die. Rise up, O men of God, have done with lesser things. Give heart and mind and soul and strength to serve the King of Kings. Rise up, O men of God, his kingdom tarries long. Bring in the day of brotherhood and end the night of wrong. Rise up, O men of God, the church for you doth wait. Her strength unequal to her task, rise up and make her great. Lift high the cross of Christ, tread where his feet have trod. As brothers of the Son of Man, rise up, O men of God. Good afternoon. Let's edify one another, shall we? It is a wonderful, wonderful day out. It is snowy. Snowing to beat the band last I looked. But I want to welcome you all to another class of the Study to Show Thyself Approved stream. We are dealing with beginning at the beginnings, which is to say our Genesis class. And this afternoon, as we are picking up in Genesis chapter 15, just by way of refresh. Genesis 15, Abram is concerned with his heir. And, it's been a very big question that is prevalent throughout all of society, essentially since God created the yes, I do, Sister T. I see you. I apologize. I meant to say hello. Hello, Sister T. Good to see you. That just shows you where my head is, which basically means it's still still on the pillow. Anyhow, Abram, the concern that Abram has over his heir has been a concern that many, many, many generations of families have had ever since God created man and placed him on the earth. And Abram is no different. He has no heir. He's never had a child. And, God has already told him, he says, I'm going to, through you and through your seed, shall all the nations of the world be blessed. Here in Genesis chapter 12, when he tells Abram it's time to leave Terah and family, he says, I will make of you a great nation. Well, how is he going to do that when he doesn't even have any children? So Lord appears unto Abram in Genesis chapter 15 and says, I am your shield and your reward shall be very great, according to the ESV. Now, Abram says, but Lord, I have no children. So God says, no, this steward of yours is not your heir, but you will have a child, someone of your own loins. Tell you what, come on outside. And now look at the stars. And can you count them? Of course, we understand from from verse 5 here, Abram likely gives him the negative. It says, if you are able to number them. And Abram says, well, I can't number them. And so God says to him, so shall your offspring be, as numberless as the stars. And what's important in this chapter is this verse right here, Genesis 15:6, which we find in about 3 other times within the scriptures. He believed him, and God counted it for righteousness. We find this particular passage quoted exactly in Romans chapter 4 and verse 3. I'll take you there and show you. Romans 4, verse 3. For what does the scripture say? Abraham believed God, and it was accounted to him as righteousness. Galatians chapter 3 and verse 6. just as Abraham believed God and it was counted to him as righteousness. And James chapter 2 and verse 3. If you pay attention to the one who wears the fine clothing, and you say, sit here. That's not James 2. 2:23. My apologies. 23, not verse 3. And the scripture was fulfilled that says, Abraham believed God, and it was counted to him as righteousness, and he was called a friend of God. So these are the three passages in the New Testament where Genesis 15:6 is referred to, and I might add, is shown as, as true. The fact that they're re-mentioned in the New Testament adds to the veracity of the Old Testament, and proves the authenticity of the Old Testament, especially of this particular passage. So as we continue on, it was his belief that that was counted to him as righteousness, because it was his belief that prompted him to obey God. But God says, I am the Lord who brought you out from Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land to possess. So God takes him out and he says, here's your offspring will be as many as the stars. And Abraham believed the Lord. And the Lord says, well, I am the Lord. I'm the one who brought you out of Ur. I'm the one that you believed in, so that you left your home to come to this land so I could give it to you. And Abraham then expresses some doubt. Well, how am I to know that I shall possess it? How am I to know? What person among us hasn't had some momentary doubt as to what's going on, or to the surety of a promise, the surety of something that God has spoken? Abraham's no different. I think sometimes we lose sight of the fact that these are people. They're not dreamed up characters, figments of man's imagination. Because a figment of man's imagination would have no foibles, would have no he wouldn't have any problems, wouldn't have any troubles in religion. And God then turns and makes a covenant, and he does so after the fashion of man, the culture at that time. Bring me a heifer 3 years old, a female goat 3 years old, and he lists a bunch of animals. And Abraham, again, in demonstration of his belief, in demonstration of his faith, does exactly what God requests. He doesn't sit there and question God. So, well, why do I need to do this? You're God. Why don't you create it? He says, no. When God says jump, Abraham was, how high, Lord? So then we noticed in verse 11 here, the birds of prey come down on the carcasses. Abraham drove them away. So he's going back and forth between these pieces, making sure that the birds do not come, don't get it. And then the deep sleep falls on him. And God makes this covenant. And in doing so, he reveals what is going to happen to the people. God's Abraham's offspring are going to be sojourners in a land that isn't there. They're going to be servants there. They will be afflicted for 400 years. Um, Hello, Sam. Yeah, I do not see Maureen or Angie's comments, but Alicia tells me that they are here. So hello, Maureen. Hello, Angie. Um, but God says, I'm going to bring judgment on that nation. And after they're going to come out with great possessions. But you're going to go to God. You're going to go to your father. You're going to die in peace and be buried in a good old age. And then in about the fourth generation, they're going to come back here. For the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. So 15 verse 17, in our explanation, we were kind of leaving off there. The sun had gone down. It was dark. Behold, the smoking fire pot and flaming torch passes between those pieces. And this is the sealing of the covenant. We have the giving of blood. We have the iteration of the covenant. Here we were just reading. That there will be offspring of Abram, that Abram will have children, and he will have descendants. Verse 13 through 17, verse 16. And we have not just the initial covenant, well, let's continue on with the covenant before we get too much further. God may then also, in his prophecy about the descendants of Abram, he also gives them the land blessing, or the land covenant. I will give this land. And he names how, the boundaries. From the river Egypt to the great river, to the river Euphrates. From the land of the Kenites, the land of the Kenizzites, the Cadmonites, the Hittites, and he lists all these. And in fact, if we were to look at the kingdom of Solomon, we would find that during that time, his realm, it did extend all the way to the river Euphrates, or pretty close to it. Oh, excuse me. Let's see. See if I can make this bigger. Yeah, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to, but no, not looking like it's going to that. You're right, Sam. It does indeed go into great detail. but it doesn't extend all the way into, to the Euphrates at the time that Joshua and them take it. It wasn't until much later. See if I can. I'm pulling up my graphics. See if I can find that. There we go. Okay, so let me stop sharing that and let me share this instead. Screen window. Sure. Okay. At the stage. There we go. Okay, so what you see on screen then is, as much as I can show you at the moment, what you have here is, this is, of course, the southwestern corner or border of the kingdom. And you have here the Mediterranean Sea, and it goes all the way down past the border of the, I think that's the Gulf of Sudan, down past Etzion Geber and to Elah. Then you have it coming all the way up here to the Euphrates. This is the Euphrates right here. And so you can see that that Solomon and whoops, I'm doing all that in the wrong screen. Okay, so what you see here is, this is the Mediterranean Sea, and here's the western border of Israel going all the way down to Elah. Sam, what God gave them was what they were able to take at that time. It was indeed the land of Israel, but it wasn't, his promise wasn't fulfilled that they would take all the way to the land of the Euphrates and to the land of Egypt, to the river of Egypt, if you will, until the time of Solomon. David undertook a great bunch of that, and as a man of war, he extended his kingdom, and that was through war. And then Solomon went on to extend it even further through his marriages. You have to be careful, because the land of Judah, or the land of Israel, was indeed given. And here we can see the division of it. You have Simeon down here. There's the land of the Kenites, and Edom, roughly, the Moabites. Edom was actually, I think, in Judah, a little bit more central, but this is Judah, and Judah went I think it went to the sea. Simeon was in Judah, or a portion of it. So some of this map is kind of not quite accurate either. But what you have is Reuben, Gad, and the half tribe of Manasseh up here. You have the Moabites, whom they couldn't take, the Ammonites. So, I mean, a lot of this is a very accurate map. And so what you have is from Dan the upper all the way down to about Dan the lower. You see there's two different Dans. There's a Dan up here by Naphtali, and then there's a Dan down here by near Jerusalem. And there was an altar and a god erected by Jeroboam in each one. Just as a side note. But this land here, basically from this area, right up here north of Tyre, over to Dan, down to the Sea of Galilee, and then over into the half tribe of Manasseh, down through Gad, Reuben, back over to the Dead Sea, following its coastline, and then down into this area. That was the land of Canaan, and that was the land that God gave them and that they were able to take. But like I said, they did not fulfill all of this prophecy until much later under the kingdom of Solomon. Going back to our passage, he makes that covenant, and if you read in Genesis chapter roughly 12, the figure was literally about 430 years before Israel was released from Egypt. And we have to understand that when God gave Abraham the prophecy, that it isn't 400 years from that day, but rather that they will be afflicted for 400 years. So they were 430 years in Egypt before they were released. So there is a period of time when Israel was in Egypt that they weren't servants, they weren't slaves. But we can look at Exodus chapter 1 and find out that there was a time, there came a time when a Pharaoh arose who did not know Joseph, was not appreciative of the stuff that Joseph did for the nation. All right, so also another important fact to kind of bring out and bring to your attention, it talks about how they are going to be released in the fourth generation. A generation is not simply the lifespan of one person, but rather the lifespan of a certain group of people. In the Bible terminology here, we can understand that roughly when it says they're going to come out in the fourth generation, we're looking at roughly 100 years to a generation. Well, that's not uncommon if Abraham lived 100 years, we understand that any of those that were his contemporaries within a certain number of years would fall within that 100-year that generation. It would be Abraham and his siblings, and and so it would be like my generation basically consists of pretty much of anybody within a span of 10 years or so, 10 to 20 years. Be about 10 years. And it's kind of interesting because you have 70s babies, you have 80s babies, you have 90s babies, and you have Gen X's, Gen Z's, and millennials, and we can continue on and on with all these different designations. But what we're looking at is basically 100 years to a generation, and in the fourth generation, during their lifespan, the 400 years, well, they're going to be released from Egypt. So, some questions then to go over as we, yes, we are live, Debbie. Some questions to consider, or as we go through and consider the, let's see if I can get a little more light on the subject. Over the last 5 chapters or so of Genesis, before we move on, anybody tell me where the descendants of Noah, where they journeyed to and where they dwelt? I think you fall within the 50s and 60s era there, Sam. Debbie says Canaan. Well, that was some of them. Africa. That's spreading out further. Let's see here. Let's look specifically. Genesis 11, verse 2. Where did the descendants of Noah journey to and dwell? You see, the descendants of Noah did not spread out until when? They didn't dwell, or they didn't go forth and begin to fill the earth and divide into the countries that we have today until when? Well, everything happened after the flood, Sam. That's relative. There's no one behind my curtains. Oh, that curtains. That would be Alicia. Um, there you go. After the Towers of Babylon. Yes, after the Tower of Babylon is when the people left and spread abroad and developed into the different nations that we have: Africa, Canaan, Asia, Europe, etc., etc. Um, so how did that happen? Um, how did or what was the cause of the um, people dividing? Hello, Reba. Good to have you. Language differences because of the confusion. That's right. Maureen says. Now, here's one to give you to thinking. Why did, or should I say, name three places where Abram built an altar? Sam says they gathered together to make a name for themselves, and God didn't like it, so he confused their languages. Um, yeah. How about, let's put it, yes, they gathered together. Um, but it says let us build ourselves a city and a tower at the top steps. Let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed. I want you to key in on that one, Sam. The name is immaterial. The tower is kind of immaterial. The reasoning is lest we be dispersed over the whole face of the earth, over the face of the whole earth. Now, why is it that God didn't like that? Thank you, Reba. He had told them to be fruitful, to multiply, to increase greatly on the earth, and to basically fill it. If we look in the KJV or most of the other translations, it's basically, you know, it all says the same thing. I want you to fill the earth. Um, so, did they do what God had told them? There it is. That's the word. That's the one I was looking for. No. How could they do what God had told them to do if they were going to sit there and make a tower, lest they be scattered upon the face, brought upon the face of the whole earth? So if they were going to build a city and make a tower and not and make and settle there and do nothing more, So they didn't get scattered upon the face of the whole earth. They were in direct disobedience to God's command. This was a command that they all knew because it was a command that was passed down from Noah and his sons. Because Noah and his sons were the direct recipients of this command. God blessed Noah and his sons and said unto them. So the whole point of the confusion of those languages was, you're not doing what I told you to do. And so if you're going to live in open rebellion to me, nothing will be restrained from them which they have imagined to do. They're going to do all sorts of wickedness. Whatever they desire to do, they will not be listening to what I told them to do if I don't take action now. They're not going to listen to what they're told to do. They're just going to go off and do whatever they imagine to do. And basically, we're going to have a redevelopment of the same condition as before the flood. And so God says, let's confound their language. 3 places where Avram built an altar. It's going to be, that one's a little difficult to figure it out, to find out. But we can find them, if you will. In Genesis chapter 12, verse 7. And that would be in Sychem or Shechem, as it came to be called. In 12, verse 8, goes on east of Bethel and pitched his tent between Bethel and Hai, or Ai, as other versions translate it. He builds an altar to the Lord. And in 13 and verse 18. Over near Hebron, in the plain of Mamre, he builds an altar unto the Lord. Another one, Sam says, is 13 verse 4. I can't do the 13 verse 4 because, unless you want to mention it as, in correlation with 12 verse 8, because this is, he comes to the place where he had built the altar between Bethel and Ai. As you can see right here in verse 3. The altar's already built. So, why did Abram and Lot separate? In Genesis chapter 13, why did Abram and Lot separate? Okay. Sam says their workers were in dispute. We can see that. Strife between the herdmen of Abram's cattle and the herdmen of Lot's cattle. Reba says they had too much cattle and herds to be sustained by one place. And Debbie says their livestock was so great. That is correct. Um, Abraham says unto Lot, "Let there be no strife, I pray thee, between me and thee, between thy herdmen and my herdmen and thy herdmen, for we are brethren. Is not the whole land before thee? Separate thyself, I pray thee, from me. If thou wilt take the left hand, I will go to the right. If thou depart to the right hand, I will go to the left." So it was the other reason, if you want to boil it down, is to keep the peace between them. Their livestock were very great. And that's what we see right here in verses 5 and 6. They had flocks and herds and tents, and the land was not able to bear them, that they might dwell together, for their substance was great, so that they could not dwell together. The land was not able to bear them. I look at some of the cattle, some of the farmers around here, and I noticed, especially this last year, that cattle farmers had a great difficulty. Those who naturally, who graze their cattle, they had a great difficulty grazing, because in the drought that we're in here in Iowa, it's so great that it's hard on the pastures, and the grass that's in the pasture is not faring so well. So there's not a good lot of nutritious grass for the cows to feed on. And so when you stop and you think about it, like my neighbor, he's got I don't know how many hundred head of cattle, but he also has a lot of pasture land to go with that. And he was constantly moving them from one pasture land to the other over the course of, every couple 3 days, because they would be tearing it down. I mean, the cows ate that down that quickly, and so he had to give the grass time to recover. Right. And that's not I'm not including the cattle lots themselves, where you have hundreds of cattle in pens who do nothing but lie around in mud and or in dirt, on dirt, and eat grain all their days. So I'm just referring to the cattle, the grazing pastures. Now, so I can understand then, just by looking around me, how the land would not be able to bear Abram, that and Lot. That means that they had a tremendous amount of cows and horses and camels and donkeys, and so yeah. What two things were used to show how numerous Abram's seed was going to be? You ain't kidding there, Sam. Reba says the stars and the sand on the beach. Pop quiz. Does anybody know exactly where those are used? Genesis 13, verse 16. God says, "I will make thy seed as the dust of the earth, so that if a man can number the dust of the earth, then shall thy seed also be numbered." Genesis 15 and verse 9. Not 9. Wrong one. 15 verse 5. Look now towards the heaven and tell the stars if thou wilt be able to number them. And he said unto him, so shall thy seed be. All right. Let's see. Where did, after their division, where did Abram dwell and where did Lot dwell? After the, okay, Reba said Lot dwelt in Sodom. Canaan and Sodom. All right, says Maureen. So Lot lifts up his eyes, beholds the plain of Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, even as the garden of the Lord, which he's referring to the Garden of Eden. So Lot chooses him all the plain of Jordan. Lot journeys east. They separated themselves one from the other. Abram dwelled in the land of Canaan. So Abram journeyed all around the land of Canaan. Lot, however, dwelt in the cities of the plain and pitched his tent toward Sodom. What this basically means is that Lot primarily gave up his nomadic lifestyle. Abram continued to be the nomad shepherd as he traveled around Canaan, wandering from place to place. Lot, however, gives it up, gets land, if you will, and settles himself in the cities of the plain in Sodom. So the question, Debbie, it's a little late now, but was after their separation, after the division, where did Abram dwell and where did Lot dwell? How old was Abram when he left Haran? He moved his tent to among the oaks of Mamre, which were at Hebron. Well, let's see. You guys got to pay attention. You're right, Abram. He did, but you notice it says he dwelled in the land of Canaan, which is indicative of him being still a nomad And while his headquarters were in the plains of Mamre, um, what we see is, okay, there's the war, and he was at Mamre there. Oh, excuse me. No. Um, see, he's been wandering around here, and he comes back to Bethel and Hai, unto the place where he built his altar at the first. And then that's where they divided, and then he goes on up to Mamre. So he removed his tent, came and dwelt in the plain of Mamre. The reason that we have him dwelling in the plain of Mamre is that it's a great plain. It's a place that's going to be able to handle all of his cattle. But we see him again going up later in the subsequent chapters. He goes up again to Abimelech, which would be over around Philistia, etc. But okay, so Sam says he left his home when he was 75. All right. Do you have a scripture reference for that, Sam? I know where it's at. I'm just testing you to see if you do. Thank you, Sam. Good job. So Abram departed as the Lord had spoken unto him, and Lot went with him. And Abram was 75 years old when he departed out of Haran. So when he left Haran, when God told him, get out of here, he was 75 years old, 75. If you can, don't forget to throw in some references there, because as we go through and we work to develop our knowledge of the Bible, knowing close to the reference is a good thing to develop as we go through here. And I'll just show you. I have all the references down on my pages. And yes, as I am using a guided book, but I've also got other books. I like having the questions. Granville Tyler was a beautiful author. These are very descriptive, very in depth. They take a lot of. They take you through a lot. Some of it's like, okay, why in the world are we going over this and over this and over this? But Granville Tyler did put out a lot of workbooks to help us know or get to know the scriptures. And so and these are still in print, you can go to tylerbooks.com. Let me post that. If you ever get an opportunity and have the desire, or you can find them at other Christian retailers. and he's got many, many different books. He goes through Old Testament lessons. He's got New Testaments, and whoops, yikes. And you can see the Old Testament lessons, New Testament lessons. That you can get from there. So that covers that. We're going to go ahead and pick up in chapter 16 next week as we continue our study in Genesis. I hope and pray that we have perhaps added to your knowledge of Genesis and of things in the beginning, not just simply taxed your mind. Now, as you ponder that, pick up, go ahead and read 16, 17, maybe even 18 if you so are inclined. We're going to try to busy through some of this. It's going to be difficult because we're really dealing with another big important incident in the life of Abram, as well as the grand scheme of things in the descendants of Abraham and in the coming of Christ. So as you read through, remember that a very good place to begin is the beginning. And in all things, we need to show ourselves approved in our studies, not to man, but unto God. So study to show yourself approved. I'll see you then. God bless in your walk with him.